The CEO, Mercedes Moné, has finally opened up about her departure from WWE in a new interview with Hot 97. She outlined some of the reasons why she had to leave WWE back in 2022. We're going to hear exactly what Mercedes had to say about that situation, break down what it means, and also talk about why she chose AEW over WWE in the end. We've got so much to get into. Before I do that, though, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released. So Mercedes Moné, back in 2022, alongside Naomi, back then she was known, of course, as Sasha Banks, left WWE in pretty controversial fashion. It was reported that they had just walked out, left the women's tag team belts on John Laurinaitis' desk. And then, of course, there was the Michael Cole reference towards them that night that had a lot of people rubbed the wrong way, and it came off as disrespectful. Then there was talk about maybe they'll come back, maybe they didn't. We obviously know Naomi, after a stint in TNA, ended up returning to WWE earlier this year. But Mercedes, on the other hand, was a very different situation. Mercedes instead ended up signing with All Elite Wrestling. So, without further ado, here is part one of what Mercedes had to say about her departure from WWE. This is with Hot 97.
What was the reasoning that you left?
There's so many reasonings.
Oh, okay.
But the biggest thing is just listening to my heart and my soul. Something didn't felt right that day. How we were talked to didn't settle in my heart. And I just instantly knew, like, if I wasn't going to take control of my life right here and now, then I was never going to be happy there by having someone talk to me the way that they do, or feeling like you just don't belong. Like, okay, I've been doing this for 14 years, and to feel like this low, my soul's like, get up, go.
That's a big decision, though.
It was the hardest decision.
I mean,
WWE was always my dream when I was 10 years old. So to be with that company for 10 years and to walk out was the hardest decision I've ever made in my whole life. But it's now the greatest decision I've ever made, because where I am today, the TBS champion, the highest paid woman in women's wrestling history.
Come on. I was
Thank
going
you,
to ask
Kev.
if that's
Thank
true.
you, Tony.
Yes.
Thank you, AEW. And I can just go on and on of all these amazing opportunities that have happened since I listened to my heart and just walked out. I walked out of that door and I walked into so many more doors that were open for me. So it's a beautiful thing. When one door closes, or when one door they want to push you out of it, just know that there's so many doors, there's so many keys waiting for you to grab to go open those doors and opportunities. So you have to go out there and get it. And know it's okay to be afraid.
Yeah.
It's okay to be afraid.
Right.
It's okay to make mistakes, because that's how you grow. That's how you learn. And these past 2 years is where I've grown the most. And it's the most fulfilling feeling in the world, knowing that I made mistakes, but how I overcome them and where I am today, because I feel the greatest I've ever felt in my life.
So that was Mercedes Moné, of course, formerly known as Sasha Banks, really for the first time in this way, because she has talked about that WWE departure, but, the insight, that they were talked to a certain way, that is relatively new. And it is not, I think, out of the realm of possibility for someone like John Laurinaitis, who allegedly was the person that she was talking about there. It's not out of the realm of possibility that we can imagine that Laurinaitis would have said something disrespectful. John Laurinaitis' reputation precedes him. This is not someone who has, been the bastion of respecting anyone, regardless of gender, but women especially. And this is even just aside from the horrendous allegations against himself and Vince McMahon. But just going back to the reputation and the stories that we have heard about John Laurinaitis over the years, is not exactly someone who I think we could say very clearly, sees women as, his equals. That's the very nice way of putting it. But regardless of that, I mean, when she mentioned that, the way she was talked to was part of the reason there, I think we've all been in some situation, right? Whether it be our boss, whether it be, someone else, someone who has power over us, or even, like if specifically you are a woman, or in Mercedes' case, a woman of color, you've definitely been in situations where people have spoken to you and it's rubbed you in a very wrong way. And it's hard to explain, but there definitely is a tone and a matter of speaking that comes across as highly offensive. I'll just say it. It comes across as highly offensive. And I think over time, that can weigh on someone. I know I felt it in my personal life, of course, not saying that Mercedes has had the exact same experience, but I think we've all kind of been there in that, like, we have been in situations where we've been talked down to or talked to in a certain way that we did not appreciate. And when you have someone like Mercedes in that situation as well, you could only imagine some of the things that were probably said disrespectfully to her. And Naomi as well, because that is another piece of this we always forget. At the same time, Naomi was in the room. And I do feel like, and this is a quick aside, I do feel like much of the criticism that has levied Mercedes' way over this whole situation is unwarranted, quite frankly. Because you have many people who would not say anything about Naomi, who was in the room, who also at the same time chose to walk out, but they will somehow criticize Mercedes. And I think that shows you and it demonstrates how little that criticism matters and how hollow it is. At the end of the day, I think a lot of people just have a narrative. There are many people who just don't want to see WWE in a bad light no matter what, and they have to blame the talent because that is their own feeling of the situation. But the truth of the matter is that over time, Mercedes Moné, it seems, was in multiple situations, as we will listen to later on in another part of an interview, where she actually said that they tried to stop her from filming The Mandalorian, which is nuts when you think about it. But this wasn't just one instant of, okay, this happened, now I'm done. This, you could tell by the interview, by things she said in prior interviews, this was a multitude of factors that ended up in this situation with her just saying, I'm done. With Naomi also at the same time, again, saying she was done, and they both left. And when it comes down to it, right, we can argue about whether or not they handled it the right way. You can make an argument about, well, whatever, maybe they should have taken their contracts and let it run out. At the end of the day, though, we need to remember this. They are independent contractors. And the way that independent contractorship usually works is either party can, dissolve the relationship at any time. Unfortunately, in wrestling, not just WWE, it's in AEW, TNA, a lot of different companies, the independent contractorship works in the wrong way, basically works in a way that restricts talent so that they are employees, basically full-time employees who are contractually obligated to be there without any of the benefits of being employees. And, has created problems for wrestlers in the past. And they obviously do not get the guarantees in many respects that other talent or other employees do. So when we're talking about, whether or not she should have handled it a different way, the other thing is WWE at any time, and they proved this in 2020, 2021, 2022, they could fire anyone at any point, at any time, and they did just that. Think of some of the biggest releases that the company did. WWE, especially back in 2022, was not demonstrating that, they were going to necessarily hold up their end of the bargain either. And that's where the company was in 2022. And obviously, there have been massive changes in the leadership of the company. McMahon is no longer there. We have Paul Levesque. You have Nick Khan, who's taken on a more prominent role. You have TKO who's come in. At the same time, it's not like they haven't done releases. It's not like they haven't gutted entire departments, even more so than WWE already did through this merger with the UFC. So, again, the independent contractorship and the status that they have, I think it's very easy for me on the outside looking in to see someone in her situation and someone like Naomi's situation just being like, why would I stay here if I'm not respected, if I'm not going to be booked logically, and also if I have no guarantee that WWE is going to hold up their end of the bargain. At a certain point, you have to make that decision for yourself. And I think that's kind of what played into this. And then that seems to be the case from what Mercedes said here. And now there is another part of this interview that we're going to play right here. This is Mercedes Moné talking about actually filming The Mandalorian and being restricted in what she could do, and WWE even trying to stop her at one point. Here's what she had to say.
Acting, I really didn't see coming because I didn't know how those doors of opportunities were going to come, especially
I always
in
wondered
WWE. And I love WWE, but they tried so hard to not make me do The Mandalorian and put me on house shows when I was supposed to film, and it was pulling teeth just to get on that show, just to be a part of that show. So these new doors of opportunity here at AEW, I have all the time in the world to go do acting and more, and Tony will pick me up on the private jet to take me to the shows and back to the other show to film. So it's so beautiful. It's so cool that I get these new doors, and I feel like it's just the universe being like, we want you to be this beautiful superstar that we see you as.
So that was, again, Mercedes Moné talking about WWE basically putting her on house shows, deliberately putting her in a situation where she couldn't do The Mandalorian. And this isn't something that's just restricted to Mercedes. This is a track record that the Vince McMahon regime definitely demonstrated a few times. Most notably, CM Punk was offered a movie role, and then suddenly it was not taken away, but he was put on house shows, so he couldn't film the movie. Randy Orton was given the movie role then. It was a very weird situation, but that is another very prominent, situation where something similar happened with this, The Mandalorian, which is one of the biggest shows on television, streaming, whatever you want to call it. One of the biggest shows out there right now. Like, you see Baby Yoda stuff everywhere. It is like Netflix's Disney Plus's top streaming show. Yet, WWE, did not want, for whatever reason, one of your biggest stars on that show. The mass appeal that would have for your product is insane. And the way that you could spin it is insane. Yet, the decision was made that it's better to have them on the road doing house shows instead of actually going and filming this mega TV show. From strictly a business and marketing standpoint, I find that frustrating. Like, my PR brain is kicking in right now. Like, how the hell? What? How do you not see that as an opportunity to build your brand? But they didn't, and I think part of it is like this very old school mentality of putting talent in their place. I think that's definitely a part of it. Saying, like, we didn't give you this opportunity, so why are you going out there and taking it yourself? You haven't earned that yet, because people like John Cena, people like The Rock, who've, given to the business or whatever, they're allowed to do that. But other people like Mercedes, who, in what you can only assume in the eyes of like that regime, did not give enough to the business, even though she had been there for like nearly a decade at that point. Those people haven't earned the right to go and off and find their own way and find their own opportunities. And again, like I said before, it's not just one thing. It's a multitude of factors. This is just another factor. And when you combine that with the booking, which people forget at the time, they were women's tag team champions, and there was no focus being put on the actual belts that they had won. Or any focus on building up that tag team division. Instead, they were just put into random like number one contendership like matches, and that may have just been the hump that broke the camel's back that night. I do very well think it was that situation. And we also heard the way that Mercedes was talking about All Elite Wrestling, the opportunities that under the Vince McMahon regime were close to her have opened up. She's allowed to do more. Obviously, with AEW, they are only on the road 2, maybe 3 times a week if they have a pay-per-view week. Otherwise, it's 2 times a week. You don't have the house shows. You don't have any of that. You maybe have a media opportunity here and there. But the reality is, you spend most of the week at home. You spend most of the week available and it gives you opportunities to either go wrestle in other places or go and find opportunities to maybe do an acting gig or whatever, right? Outside ventures. Like, it's possible under AEW, and it's possible to do it on the biggest stage because Mercedes right now is, according to her, the highest paid women's wrestler on the planet. We knew that Charlotte Flair back in the day, like last year, I should say, got a mega deal that reportedly had made her one of, if not the highest paid women's wrestler. Mercedes confirmed that she is that, and that was also like one of the sticking points between her and WWE when they had reinitiated talks late last year. And Triple H, of course, was like heading up WWE at that time, so it's a different regime. So why wouldn't she at least talk and see what was going on? What ended up happening, reportedly, according to, I believe, Wrestling Observer and Fightful, was that Mercedes did not get the deal that she wanted. WWE did not offer up enough money. And then by the end of, I think it was World's End, literally, it was reported that Mercedes was basically expected to go to AEW. So, and I mean, that's what happened. And now, we've heard her mention this a few times, Tony Khan, opening up the private jet, which, personally, I don't think anyone should be flying a private jet like that, but that's my own personal take on that. But obviously, her boss in this respect is supporting her and treating her like someone who has given as much as she has to this business. And that is what I think a lot of this is about. It's about that respect that she wasn't given in WWE, that she feels like she's getting in AEW. That's why I think she's very complimentary of not only the company, but Tony Khan himself, who obviously he understands that getting Mercedes was a big get. They're about to have this big feud between herself and Britt Baker. That's going to be a big time thing. But, I say all this, right? But I'm also in the back of my head thinking, is it possible that we see Mercedes back in WWE at a certain point? Well, she even said it in, I believe it was her first interview before she debuted at AEW Big Business. She straight up said, I'll probably end up going back. And people took that as a weird dig at AEW or whatever. I think anyone who thinks that's a dig either doesn't understand what she was trying to say or the realities of the business, or you're pretty disingenuous. Reality is, there are a lot of people who are going to go back and forth. And there are going to be people who go back and forth who disparage the other company in the past. That's just going to happen. The landscape of professional wrestling is different. All Elite Wrestling is offering similar, if not more, compensation to talent to work less of a schedule and, focus more on professional wrestling if that's your thing, but also less wear and tear on your body. And if you have to choose between that, spending time with your family, or WWE, where that, again, still kind of has to be earned in a weird way, you're going to see talent from WWE choose AEW. That's going to happen. Ricochet, obviously, reportedly has done that. We've heard reports of other talent also choosing to do that. I mean, Will Ospreay talked about how that was a major factor in his decision to land with AEW. So I don't see that as a big deal because I do think Mercedes could well end up in WWE. And that's a good thing because that means that WWE's up their offering price. That means WWE's up their game as far as what they're offering talent. And that is good for talent, especially when you throw yourself at the ground for a living. You do that for a few years, you're going to earn some level of compensation, and you should. So that's kind of where we are. Obviously, this is big news. Mercedes Moné, first real comments like this towards WWE about her departure. But let me know in the comments section what you guys think. I want to hear from you. What do you guys think about Mercedes' comments? Do you think that she will end up going back to WWE in a couple of years when her contract is done? Will she end up staying in AEW? Let me know in the comments section. Also, be sure to smash that like button if you haven't already done so. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you get notified whenever a new video is released.